Hey folks, it's Nate, and it's time I got back to the drawing board, and today we are going to take a look at $4.99. That's right, I finally got in the new Narwhal-Zack compilation. I have, of course, the comic and payment on delivery, along with a few extras. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the form factor before we get into the heavy stuff. Both of these books are very good quality. The square bound $4.99 is an interesting take. It has that nice, smooth feel to the cover that I really liked about Iron Sights. And then it has that nice, high-quality, slick magazine paper inside. Personally, I prefer a little more roughness to the paper in my books. I prefer something closer to a traditional paper page, to an art book page. But there's nothing wrong with glossy magazine paper, and that's what we get. Payment on delivery is a floppy. It doesn't have any kind of real binding, just staples. But both the cover, as you can probably tell by its shininess, and the interior are really good quality, heavy, high gloss paper. This is a great page to accidentally flip open to for monetization purposes. As if I had monetization. Anyways, payment on delivery. We're going to talk about the art and the story in each of these books separately, just FYI. So we're going to start with payment on delivery. This book is interesting. Art-wise, it's not Narwhal's best work. It is pretty much what you're going to expect if you're already familiar with his style. It's very sketchy, a little cartoony, very fluid. If you like the animation and expression in his drawings, you're going to like the art here. Unfortunately, there's a lot of talking in this, and while Narwhal does a good job with his composition in his talking shots, he's really at his best when he can show really great animated shots, and there's not a lot of opportunities for that in payment on delivery. I think there would have been better artists for this than Narwhal. It just doesn't play to his strengths as an illustrator. Also, it is in black and white like Foreign Agent, but Foreign Agent had a lot of shading in it to help give that sense of shape and fluidity that I really love about Narwhal's art. And unfortunately, whether deliberately or just because of time constraints, Narwhal doesn't have a lot of shading in here. And I feel the art loses some of its impact for that. I don't know if that was a deliberate creative decision. I don't know if that was something that was brought about due to time constraints. Either way, I'm not as big a fan of this as I am of something like Foreign Agent or the first installment of Earthbound. Still, it's pretty good art, and if you like Narwhal's stuff, you're going to like what's here. If you're not a fan of Narwhal's stuff, there's nothing here that's going to change your mind. Either way, whatever your opinion, this is just more of it. So story-wise, what do I make of payment on delivery? Well, it's interesting. It's got a great sci-fi premise. Aliens made a deal with the Nazis. They would exchange high-tech weapons for Nazi troops. And obviously, this fell through because the Nazis lost the war. And when the aliens show up to complete the contract, decades later, essentially in the modern day, or at least in the late 90s, there's no Nazis for them to talk to. And this is really awkward. And Earth wonders what's going to happen if they don't fulfill it. So they all masquerade as Nazis, and they fulfill the contract. And I'm kind of disappointed with this story, more because it's not what I was expecting. It's more an episode of The Twilight Zone than it is a sci-fi adventure in the Star Trek vein, which, given your boy Zach's love of Star Trek, is kind of what I had expected more. It has a twist ending, which I was expecting. I was expecting Earth was going to have to play some kind of brilliant trick on the aliens in order to get out of this. And it turns out that Earth was not the one. Well, they try a trick, but they basically play into it, which is not what I was expecting. And the aliens turn out not to be the aliens that the Nazis made a deal with. They turn out to be the aliens that beat the aliens the Nazis made a deal with, if that makes any sense. So the Genomians, I think it is. By the way, there's going to be spoilers in this review. The Genomians were oppressing other groups of aliens, much like Nazis were oppressing other groups of humans on Earth, and the Genomians lost. And now that the Genomians are defeated, the aliens have come to Earth to make sure the Nazis are not on Earth to be a threat. And when they realize that the Nazis are gone, and that Earth is willing to pretend to be Nazis to get their hands on alien tech, they blow up Earth, which is an ending. It's a twist ending. It's not a bad story, but there were some things that I would have done differently if I was just telling this story. The biggest two have to do with setting up the players for me to take them, for me to understand where they're coming from a little bit more. What I mean by that is I would have set up Earth as a little more suspicious of these aliens, but willing to cynically go along with this no matter what, just to get some high-tech weapons. I would have had them asking themselves if these were really the Genomians, if there was anything they could do to, weasel out of the deal, things like that. And then decide to go along with it strictly out of self-interest. There are some moments that are kind of like, oh, well, yeah, these humans are pretty bad, and it's fair that the aliens blew them up. But there's not enough to really convince me that this was a justified thing the aliens did. And on the flip side of the coin, I would have had more hints for the audience that there was a test going on rather than it's simply having a reveal at the end. Because it really doesn't seem fair that humanity winds up in this fail state when they had no clue that they had an out. That these aliens were sympathetic to them. I would have worked in a couple of scenes between the aliens and the humans where it was kind of hinted at that these aliens would accept Earth not being Nazi. And you don't get any of that, and that definitely feels unfair. It definitely feels not so much like a test as it is some kind of just playing around with your prey. It doesn't feel fair to the humans on Earth. Because usually these kind of sci-fi stories are meant to present a lesson on not being jaded or not being willing to do anything to get ahead. And I don't really feel like this story accomplishes any of that. So it's basically just a story about aliens who want to blow up Earth. I don't find it that interesting. Kind of disappointing. Zack has worked in some really good plot twists into other stories of his that I've read. And I was hoping for a good twist in here. And there's definitely a twist. And it could have played really well. But I think Zack didn't set it up well enough. In the story he had. Maybe it would have done better if it was a longer story. I don't know. As it is, intriguing idea. The dialogue is pretty good. The laying out of all the exposition is really good. I'm just not satisfied with the way the main thrust of the story plays out. I think it could have been done better. But, it is the side story. So how is the main event? $4.99 is a better story, undoubtedly. Is it a little bit better or is it a lot better? That's harder to say. $4.99 is interesting, but let me switch out of story mode and talk about the art. This art is much better. It has a lot more of that shading and sense of form and animation. It has a lot better moments for Narwhal to show off his trademark loose and flowing style. I really love this moment where we see the protagonist's father just sitting in his chair with his gun, and he's drunk, and it's interesting. It's very dynamic. Now the weird color schemes I am less a fan of. They do have the effect of making what's important pop and push everything else into the background. And that's interesting. You can do a lot of interesting lighting tricks and effects tricks with this. I'm just not a fan of the colors. I think I haven't seen what these pages would look like in natural coloring, but I think I would have preferred that. I don't know because I haven't seen them in that. But it's really garish, and there are some scenes I struggle a bit with to take seriously, even though there are really serious things going on. I'm not going to spoil the ending here. Let me just let me break it down on two fronts. The naturalness of the writing and the thrust of the story, because again, this is a story that is presenting a specific message, and the message is about people who have come back from war, in a war that is still ongoing, and in a society that has largely been changed by war. And the naturalness of the story is really good. It's about a kid who got hurt in a very militaristic society, and he's in a cast, and he's recovering from an injury, and he won't tell anyone how he got the injury, so everyone assumes he's a coward and it's self-inflicted, and he was trying to get out of a showdown he had with another student. In the meantime, there's a prankster running around causing trouble around the school, and they are leaving the numbers 499 there. The minimum number of acceptable push-ups for a soldier, or a soldier in training, as most of these students are, is 500, and so just doing 499 doesn't seem kosher. And that's an interesting hook, especially when we discover that there is a group called the 499 Club at the school. All school children, it seems like, are expected to enlist unless they are physically incapable of it. But this 499 Club is all people who have artistic bents. They want to play music, they want to make movies, they want to draw comics, or what have you. And that's an interesting take. Like, dissent has to go underground. This is not a very free society anymore. And the story lays this all out pretty naturally. We get it through dialogue. There are no big exposition dumps. There are occasionally exposition captions, like this one here, where we're told what a keyhole is. Somebody getting shot through the eye hole of a Kevlar dueling suit. That was interesting. I don't know if that's a real world term that's been repurposed. Of course, your boy Zach was in the Marines, as he has said repeatedly. So he may have taken that term keyhole from something they said in the Marines and repurposed it for the purposes of this story. But otherwise, the exposition in here is really good. We get a sense of what's going on without having too much of the world spelled out for us, which is also good. I think for this kind of story, it's enough to intrigue the imagination, but not so much that it drags the story down. We get a sense for the protagonist and some of his closest friends, but not a whole lot of other people, which is not so good, especially as regards 499 himself, which is what I'm going to call this guy here on the cover. This is the troublemaker who's running around school, putting graffiti on stuff and only doing 499 push-ups every day. 499 himself is an interesting character, but I would have wanted to know more about him, I think, before we got the twist of who he was. So we see 499 both as the saboteur and also in his civilian identity, which I am not going to spoil, because I thought that was a great twist. I only saw it coming a couple of pages ahead, which is really good, because it shows there was enough hints for me to figure it out, and thus it's fair to the audience. But it wasn't so obvious that I got there way ahead of time, and there was still a lot of suspense. That said, I wanted to see a few more hints, a little bit more 499 himself, to really put all of those pieces in place. On the execution of the story, I do have one kind of gripe. We are introduced to new flesh, which is basically a way to, or new skin, here it is. New skin, it's a spray. You spray it over a burn. It helps your burn heal and also makes it look like it's not a burn. And apparently, it doesn't always match the skin tones of the people who are using it. And that idea was introduced as part of a red herring moment. We saw two people talking to each other. Turns out they were related, but they had different skin tones, and one of them had a different skin tone because that person was wearing new flesh or new skin. Interesting. That's an interesting idea and an interesting way to use elements that are set up early in the story to resolve a conflict later in the story. However, that idea then set up the possibility, at least in my mind, that 499 was one character who was wearing new skin to appear as if they were somebody else. And if you read the story, I think that will make sense. The protagonist tries to take a fall for this other person, it looks like, as does someone else at the school. And at that moment, I thought I knew who 499 was. And then when the twist came, and it turned out New Skin was not a piece in that at all, I was disappointed. I don't know if there's anything that really could have been done to catch that. And I may be the only one that had that reaction. But all in all, I think the way the story plays out is very natural, which is good. I have some issues with the way the theme of the book is handled, mainly because I don't feel it was handled the best. 499 is about a bunch of people who are artists in a society that does not value art. Really interesting idea. There's the 499 Club where they all hang out and they work on their personal projects in a circle that will not reveal this to the population at large. But we really don't see any of their projects in depth, except for the guy who really likes to play music, who is typically just playing music in the background. We don't get to get a sense of why those kinds of artistic expressions are really important to them, what they hope to do with them. We just know that they really like them. And the protagonist himself does not seem like the artistic type, so even he doesn't really give us a whole lot of insight into what the tensions are, because we are really focused on the mystery of who 499 is and how all the mischief that's happening around the school is going to play out. In and of itself, either one of these story conflicts, 499 and the rest of the school, or artists in a society that does not value art, are really strong. I don't think there's enough space in this book to really unpack either of those conflicts very well. And it's important that they do, because 499 is both of those conflicts. 499 was an artist who eventually started to protest, and these pranks are his way of artistically protesting without really putting anyone in a whole lot of danger until the end. And I think the story could have been longer and unpacked this better. I think some of the high school drama BS could have been cut to emphasize these conflicts more. Because there is a love triangle in this book, and I feel like it's more of a distraction from the heavier themes that the book is really trying to unpack. And I would have liked more space set aside for that part of the story and less time spent on some of the generic high school drama that is in this book. Even though that is one of the strengths of Earthbound that Narwhal executed on so well in part 1 of that book, and hopefully in part 2, which is coming soon. But Earthbound was a longer book than 499 was. And I think that extra space really made things work better. And I think 499 would have benefited a lot from that extra space. And that would have really given us a stronger emotional resonance with 499, with the protagonist, and with the people in the 499 Club who are trying to explore art in the society that doesn't care about it. I have some I have some disagreements with the way Zach has kind of predicted this society. It doesn't really feel like I think this society would form for a lot of sociological reasons. But I think that's not quite as important. Really, 499 exists in a fantasy world where the society is structured to play out this drama, to play out these themes. And yes, in some ways, it kind of contradicts the human experience, but I think we are looking at a world that is writ large a reflection of some of Richard's experiences in the Army. And I think he's trying to examine some of the things that happened to him personally and he saw happen to other people as he was in the military. Because again, he was a military guy for a long time. And he is trying to take that experience and make a world where that experience can be writ large to show us the difficulties of it. And while I don't think this world could ever actually exist, I think that as a venue for that story, it's very, very insightful. And I wish that the actual story themes had been executed on a little stronger, and some of the side conflicts had just gotten a little less showtime. So yeah, I would encourage Zach, if he sees this video, to look at doing slightly longer projects when you have such a dense story as this. I know Narwhal has the chops to write a longer story, and I think Zach, his name could have carried it. But this is what we got, and it's good, but it's not great. And it had a really great idea. I would have liked to see it executed on better. Hey, maybe in the future. There were, which I dropped, a couple of extra things that came with the projects. We got the poster for the 499 Club. This is the introduction panel of the 499 Club on a nice piece of cardstock. It looks cool, but that's all there is to it. And then there was this interesting Megaton collection, which is just a bunch of Narwhal's illustrations put into a zine. And I really like this because I feel like neither of these books really showcase his art at its best. And while they're just basically pinups, you do get some of Narwhal's best art in here, and it looks really good. Both of those are really nice. There were also some stickers. I'm not a huge fan of stickers. There was no patch, which I am a huge fan of, even though I don't put them on anything. Kind of disappointed in that. I would have liked a $4.99 patch. Missed possibilities there, but what you gonna do? A lot of this kitsch is just that kitsch. I really do like having Megaton, and the posters okay. But yeah, so it was a good campaign. I would recommend picking up $4.99 if you can. I don't know if there will be copies of Payment on Delivery floating around out there. If you're a big fan of sci-fi, you may enjoy that story. I'm not as warm on that story as I am on $4.99 itself, but they can't all be winners. And I do think there is a good story in $4.99. I would recommend reading it, especially if you're into war stories or stories about soldiers who come home from war, because it is both. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. There's a like button and a subscribe button down below. You can use those as you see fit. Let me know if you have any thoughts on $4.99 or the writing of war stories in general. I'll talk to you later.